Welcome to the Human Era podcast, a show where we discuss the future of humans in a world that is dominated by technology. What does tomorrow look like, and how can we stay true to what we really are? Humans. Welcome to a new episode of the Human Era podcast. My name is Ferry, and today I am joined by Ryan Morgan. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Ferry. Glad to be here.
It's good to have you here. Could you give us a brief introduction about who you are, where you're from, what you're doing right now?
Okay. My name is Ryan, obviously. I'm a PhD researcher at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. I'm a sociologist by training. My undergraduate was in clinical psych and behavioral science, but I didn't use that for about 12 years or so because I worked in the US military for a while. Originally from Texas, so American by coincidence, but Texan by choice and identity. So I ended up in the Netherlands in 2018 to do a master's at Erasmus University. I did that in political sociology and was able to find a place in the academy there. So I'm hoping to continue that now.
Wow, that sounds good. Can you just take us through, like, how do you go from living in the USA, working for the US Army, to being a researcher in Rotterdam? How does that work?
It's a wild ride. I come from I guess the interesting way to say it might be a Marshall family, but my dad and other relatives were in the military. So being a kid, I wanted to just be like my dad. He flew fighter jets, so I thought that was cool. I didn't think anything about the military. I just thought fighter jets were neat. So I went to the same military university that he went to. I did that, graduated, commissioned as an officer. Didn't get to fly, though, because I hurt my shoulder playing rugby, so they gave me a different job. That job put me in the intelligence field. So I ended up spending about 12 years as an intelligence officer, working specifically with intelligence technology, what we called the ISR. It's like intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance stuff, which was really neat. So I got to see a lot of cutting edge technological data collection methods. And, that was a very unique experience that took me all over the place. So I actually didn't live again in the United States. I left in 2007 and I didn't live there again until about 2015. So I spent time in North Africa. I lived in the Middle East. I clearly went to some of the war zones, but I also spent time in Southern Europe. I lived in Italy for a while, which was really neat. Then I made some time in Japan and then ended up back in the United States to do a little bit. But I was sort of phasing out of the military there. I had had a couple of hypotheses that I was like, I want to be in this unit. I want to be doing this really specific work. And the scientific side of me was like, okay, you've tested that hypothesis and it's not where you need to be. So something else is out there for you. But I had always liked teaching and instructing, and that had always been a big part of my military career as well, was teaching other officers how to use certain things, teaching them how to approach different technologies and different, problems when it comes to intelligence collection. And so I wanted to translate that into something. So I started looking at different disciplines. I had always been interested in psychology, anthropology, and sociology. And my time abroad in different cultures had really impacted me very strongly. And so I went the sociology route to maybe understand these intersections between different cultures and at the societal level, not just the individual level. And that brought me to the political sociology program in Rotterdam. It was actually suggested to me by my girlfriend because she is Dutch. And so we had met while I was finishing up some time in Germany, and she was a big impetus because I was kind of like, yeah, I'll come to the Netherlands and hang out with you for a while. It's been 4.5 years now, so it's still a while, still going, which is great. But she introduced me to the university, and I found a really nice place in that program. Made some good friends. Really was inspired by a lot of the instructors that worked there, and thought I could really make a place for myself here. I love Rotterdam. I love the grit of the city, so it's kind of one of my favorite things about it. So I thought this would be a good place to really set down some roots and start pursuing this intersection of technology, because I think the Netherlands has lots of opportunities for that. There were a couple other institutes that I looked at. The Tilburg Institute of Law and Technology. I noticed the Tilt. That's super awesome work that they're doing there. The stuff that they're doing at TU Delft was really inspiring. So for me, coming out of a master's program, my master's thesis had been on data privacy and the ways that we measure it, because there's all this discussion about paradoxical behavior when it comes to data privacy, right? We say things like, "Oh, I want to protect my data and I want to, keep that to myself." And then we're telling our neighbors and people online, "Here's my password, here's all my data info, here's all this, here's all that." And people think that doesn't add up. But the thing that I was looking for was, well, what's the contextual issues that surround privacy? Because I really like that idea. And that's where I found a home at this point that you mentioned, where technology and human aspects of society and of life really intersect, and what we say, they co-produce each other. So that's sort of what I'm pursuing now, and that's taken me into this PhD program. I spent 2 years as a tutor there, teaching in an international program, management of international social challenges. So got a foothold with the community there, was able to get picked up for this PhD position working with Clark Jehovah in the organizational dynamics in a digital society, I guess, school, body, or master's program. And that's where I'm today. We're working on a big project for the ERC that we really like, the Ghost Work project, talking to different crowd workers and micro workers around Europe to see where this work is done and why it's done and how that work relates or impacts their well-being if it does.
So what is ghost work?
So ghost work is a term. It's I think it was coined in 2018 by Mary Gray and Siddharth Suri. They're two researchers from Microsoft. Mary Gray, I think, is an anthropologist by trade, and Siddharth is a computer scientist. And they saw this work through their work with Microsoft, and they saw that there was all this human labor that happened behind AI. And the dream of AI is that it's pure, it's automated, it's very clean and efficient. But the reality that they discovered that there's a lot of what we would call hidden labor, right? So maybe pre-existing terms like hidden labor or shadow work that exist behind it. And so their term ghost work captures the conditions under which this human labor happens. It's the sort of anonymizing, at times dehumanizing, and also isolating conditions of working on different platforms or working under different kinds of micro tasks that are essential to supporting AI, essential to training data, essential to machine learning processes, but often go unrecognized and unseen in the industry. And so that's what we picked up, and we want to look at, okay, this is a growing field, AI just writ large, but that means there's more work behind it, right? There's more human labor behind it. And we want to see where's that done in Europe, because the global narrative really focuses on like the US and India and a lot of the big players that sort of dominate the market or the sector. But Europe has an important place there, and there are a growing number of people doing this type of work in Europe. So we wanted to look more specifically at that.
Okay, so that makes sense, because we actually met through one of these programs, right? Some of your students did a project with the institute that I work for, on that intersection of humans and technology, and they also mainly focused on artificial intelligence. I think there's a big part of human labor on the like behind the scenes when working with technology. You see a rise in data scientists, people who try and understand and figure out the technology, and like you said, try to make it more humane or maybe even more anonymous. Mm-hmm. But you've seen multiple cultures, you've seen multiple organizations and institutes working with technology. What do you see on the other side? Like, do you see something happening on them trying to create technology for good? Or do you see organizations just jumping on the AI bandwagon and going with it? Is there like a difference between different countries or cultures?
That's a really great question. And I think that's something that we're exploring, because the interesting fact is that a lot of the big players are from specific cultures, right? Many of the big tech companies and the big, in our sort of narrow view right now, a lot of the big digital labor platforms are American companies, and they are offering this labor on a global level, but it's an American sort of corporate structure that defines how this goes. And there have been big platforms to come up. One of the biggest platforms here in Europe is Clickworker, for example, and based in Essen, Germany. And so they do some really interesting offers where they have an American page and then they have a German page. And a number of these other platforms don't offer that. But things that we see is that the structure of the platform labor tends to be similar across the way these platforms are organized infrastructurally, the way that they divvy out labor. So the early platforms coming out of the US really set the groundwork or set the foundation for how other platforms would build. But there are some really interesting projects going on that are looking at how different cultures and different countries and different populations of workers could be made better, or could be given more opportunities by changing this up. And one of those is a platform that's recently in the news, not for some not so great stuff, I guess, in their work with Facebook, but they're a platform called Sama, and they focus on offering this digital labor opportunities to people in, I think it's Nairobi, in Kenya, and basically looking to the African continent and African populations to say, okay, where do we have an opportunity within this culture to make sure that the African voice is also heard, and we can also bring this this form of employment to more people and provide more opportunities to some of these places that are underserved by this this technology or this this service. So, yeah, long answer to your question. There are lots of different aspects that I see. I don't think I can pin any down right now, though, but I'm really curious about it, because we know that workers in Romania and workers in Germany are different. We know that the needs for AI and the relationships to technology, when we start speaking a little bit bigger than just platform work, they are different across cultures. You know, the American culture is very technological, especially like within the home, right? That's one thing my European friends always criticize me about, is I'm always adding kitchen gadgets. You know, I've got the slow cooker and the coffee maker and the air fryer and the this and the that, and they're like, just get a pan and cook things like a real person would cook things in a kitchen. I'm like, no, I'm American. I have to have all these devices, you know. But with the spread of like the Internet of Things, we start to see that proliferation again of a more maybe monoculture. And that's a big question right now in the field, is how much monoculture is there really in this technological progression? And do these other cultures really have a place to express themselves?
I think there's differences in especially how they look at these innovations. Because from my point of view, I've seen different cultures working with AI where I'm not going to name and shame, but there's countries that just want to do AI because they feel that they're lacking behind. Mm-hmm. Not even so much looking at cultures or looking at continents like Africa, how they can support them or bring the technology that way. They're just focusing on being part of, you know, the hype and the bubble. One thing that I noticed is there's a big difference between the EU and the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Because the Middle East, they are kind of like low-key, they're under the radar. But in the United Emirates, they have a plan. It's called AI 2030. They've written out a full plan up until 2030, how they can create technology that has problem-solving capabilities. So they are actually looking at what are the problems that we have today, what are the problems that we think we are going to face in the next 10 years, and what should we make and create in order to support us be more humane. And they are actually building like giant call centers that have a mix between humans and technology. Which is awesome, which I personally support. But then the other culture that I see, which is where I personally work in more often, is the EU and specifically the Netherlands, where the Netherlands says we've been behind for the last 5, 6, 7 years, especially looking at USA, looking at China. They've been developing, they've been researching, they've made huge mistakes, but they've also made giant learnings. And the only thing that we can do right here is look at their learnings and try and learn from that and create our own thing. Yeah. The EU is really, and that's just my personal feeling, is really trying to explore creating technology for the sake of creating technology. And it often feels like we're going to create a solution and then we're going to find a problem that matches our solution. That's kind of the thing that I've seen. And I think I can only speak for the EU and for the Emirates, and I think that the Emirates have a plan laid out, and they're not afraid of being a year behind because they spent that year researching. And I've seen, especially here the last 3-4 years, we're not researching and we're not building, we're debating. Well, you said you've been in the Netherlands for like 4 years, so you know we're the country of debating. We just talk it out. Yeah, we don't really do anything. We just talk about doing stuff. And that's also the culture right here. Because we're just looking at all these other countries. We see the Emirates, we see them moving away, USA moving away, China's moving away from us. And that puts a feeling on us of we need to do something, just build something. At least we have AI on our platform. And that's the kind of feeling that I get from this culture. So can you attest for any other cultures, how they like plan for the next like 10 years?
So that's a really tough spot for me, I think, because I've been floating between so many. You know, I would love to sit back and talk about AI in the U.S. and its position, but that's kind of clear, I think, on the way that big tech is growing and sort of what they're trying to do. But I don't think I can speak about any other culture relatively intelligibly. But what I can, just like you did, is I can say from my own observations what I see. And from being in the EU for a little while now, what I can see is there's tension, right? Because it's kind of the middleman, if I can, the middle person, not to gender that, but because you have the U.S. still out in front, just in breadth and amount, but then you have really upcoming communities like China, right, that are really starting to invest and I guess grow exponentially. There's a really good book I read a little while ago about these different AI positions that are evolving. It's called The Big Nine by Amy Webb. And she's talking about the US companies that are investing in artificial intelligence and then the handful of Chinese companies that are investing. But what's left out of this conversation is the EU. And I think the EU feels that. And they recognize that. And it's interesting and maybe particular to the EU construct that each country is kind of perceiving that tension in its own way and trying to figure out, okay, well, where do we go, right? Like, so the Netherlands goes this way and, Spain goes this way. And the EU, and what we're hoping to maybe assist as researchers, is the EU is trying to find a way to say, okay, how can we help all of our member states get a better, more comprehensive, holistic position in this field, so that we as a bloc can grow and still leave room for national character and individual approaches towards culture, but really make a collective effort to position ourselves. And there's a lot of really interesting debate about what that collective position would look like. Is it trying to be out in front? Is it really trying to catch the forerunners? Or is it maybe trying to take a different position and be an agent of change? And this is what I really like about the potential for the EU's position, is that there's a lot of opportunity for it to play that agent of change role, right? Looking at building out a different kind of platform ecosystem, let's say, or a different kind of AI sort of cultural web. And there's a lot of good research going on. Erasmus has a couple AI initiatives that they're working on. And I know we're working closely with TU Delft and I think it's Leiden University to talk about big data and sort of the evolving urban city structure. So with regards to my perspective on that, I think it's still evolving. I'm still learning, but I can see, much as you said, that the EU is really trying to find its way, and the Netherlands in particular is trying to be out in front. I think it was curious to be in Germany this last week and see their relationship to it too, because it's a little bit more tenuous. It seems a little bit more. This is again just my complete perspective from my very narrow experience with it, but they seem a little bit more narrow and more niche. German innovation seems to be more directed in certain sectors, while I think the Netherlands is really coming at it very broadly. How can AI improve our cities? How can it improve our social structures? And it's not just limited to industry or any particular economic sector. They're really investing in casting a broad net with the technology.
Yeah, that's true. That one of the things that the Netherlands is doing, and it's done from the National AI Coalition, is that they look at every sector and how they can improve them. And there's a load of EU money to support it, to support research, to support building. And what they've done is they created a coalition. We're actually part of that coalition.
Yeah.
To combine government with organizations and people, as in consumers, as in people living in a specific city or area. And what they're trying to do is to find problems in specific areas, and then they create a task force or a workforce specifically with experts from that area. So they've got industry, they've got communication, human resources. And what they do is they try and just communicate with each other, like what are the problems that we're facing? What are the opportunities that we have? Which experts do we have in this group? And how can we tackle this problem? Then they try and allocate some money from that EU budget and just fight that problem specifically with those areas. And what they're also trying to do is make it as humane as possible, in the sense that they look at the USA for the technical innovations. And they look at China on the social aspect, because there's a lot of opinions about how China is using artificial intelligence. And I think we're trying to be somewhere in the middle. Okay, what are those effects what is the US creating? What is it? How does it work? How can we benefit from it? What can we learn? They also have groups of people going there just to talk to researchers and see what's happening. And then look at China, what's the social impact if you go that deep into society with technology? And then we just back up, we look at it, and then we try to figure out okay, what can we use and what should we never, ever, ever use? So that's a good thing. And I think indeed the Netherlands is focusing on specific parts of that. And I actually I was surprised to hear it, but also proud that people in Spain and Germany look at the Netherlands as being innovative and moving fast. Because I'm joking that we're talking a lot, but there's also a lot happening, especially with Brainport in Eindhoven, TU Delft, Rotterdam. There's so much happening, but I think it's also maybe a Dutch thing that we talk about it a lot, but we don't give details. We work hard, and then suddenly we go out with the results, where we're not talking about the entire process. So it could take a year or 3, and then suddenly we have something huge, and the entire EU can benefit. I think that's a Dutch thing.
Yeah, I think it really is. It's something that I was introduced to is okay, yeah, well, it's more important for us as the Dutch to have a collective discussion process about this than maybe to come to a solution all the time. But the thing that I find is that, that's a little stereotypical in the fact that the Dutch come to solutions. And that's something I really like, is that we're going to get there. And I can appreciate that both from a research side and just from a pragmatic side, which is something I really, again, love about the city of Rotterdam and the university, is that they have this whole pragmatic sort of vision and goal going forward. And I think the Netherlands carries that forward with its approach to AI, because the US approach is we need something new. We need the newest thing. We need that out and about. And just how can we change the technology, and how can we really make the biggest impact in the field with whichever sort of tech improvement we have. And then, like you said, China offers a different position, and they say, okay, how can we better execute our social programs, our social sort of agenda with the technologies that either exist or that we can come up with. So it's good to hear that your perspective on the EU's position is somewhere in the middle, right? Looking at both and saying, okay, we want to find a real solution, but we don't want to go too, technocratic like the US might sometimes. But we also don't want to maybe go too deep into the social world, because we don't share maybe those same principles or those same social outlook that maybe the Chinese look or other cultures might look. So finding a unique position is actually a really healthy, I think, way to approach artificial intelligence. And it's one that doesn't just benefit the EU, right? Because we're in such a point in time right now where this AI swing and this AI revolution, if we want to call it that right now, is still kind of young, right? So there's a lot of room for influence. There's a lot of room for change in direction. And there's a lot of room to really impact what the future of this technology looks like. And that has really important consequences, I think, for societal structure on a global level. And the more time we take to debate, like the Dutch might, and to think about it, and the more, I guess, collective reasoned solutions we come up with, incorporating all those innovations and all those social perspectives from around the globe, the better a future infrastructure we build for AI.
Yeah, I think that that's exactly the spot that we're at. Also, like you said, AI is very much at the beginning stage. It's also the beginning stage of Web3. I think also many times something is called artificial intelligence, but it's not really artificial intelligence. And one of the things, and that's a topic that I especially want to ask you and your opinion on, is we often see technology being used, and you could even call it misused on the human side, on the consumers. Like I said, AI is still in the beginning phase. You have a lot of things like chatbots that are being called artificial intelligence, but they're just pre-programmed. They're scripts. They're not really understanding humans. You're doing research on that area, right? Like how humans and technology can collaborate, work together, co-create.
To an extent, right? So for me right now, my focus is pretty narrow on this platform work and looking at the way those platform infrastructures influence the way people do this work and how that work influences them. But there is a lot of work going on out there about like chatbots and how we interact with that, and other elements of AI about how the human plays into that and where the human sort of factor is super important. And while I'm super interested in that, and I've read, I feel like a good amount about it, and I'm excited to do work with it, I do have to say that my particular research right now is not too far onto that. It's a very narrow focus in that area.
What's your personal take on things? Like we just saw the differences between different cultures and how they work with technology. What do you see on the technology side interacting with humans from your perspective?
So not to be maybe too philosophical about it, but I think there's a really interesting question at the heart of that. And it's like, what do we want this relationship to be? All right. What is the relationship that we as human beings want to have with our technology? Because it's something we kind of take for granted on a daily basis, right? You're born into the world, you're given a suite of different technological devices that evolve as you get older, and you never are really given the chance to sit down and think, how do I want to use this? Like, what is, for me maybe, or for our society, the appropriate relationship to have to our tech, to have to our tools that help us get through the world? And I think we're at a unique time with this, with the evolution of more advanced artificial intelligence, more advanced automation, right? Some of these more algorithmic functions that fall under the AI moniker, but really are a little different. We're at a point where we can really look at that and say, okay, what do we want this relationship to be? And the important thing for us there is an age-old question that you and I have talked about a little bit before, right? It's like, okay, what does it mean to be human in this then? Because if we are going to establish a relationship between ourselves and technology, we have to understand both sides, right? Okay, what is the technology that we have available? But then what are the human things? And those are things that we often gloss over, right? Like, what are human goals? What are human visions for social infrastructures? What do we think about when we think of the vision of the future, or we think of the kind of autonomous life that we as humans want to continue to have? Okay? And where is the role that technology plays in that? I think that's a fundamental question. So I think the things that I see are important are going back to really fundamentally human questions. We get distracted, I think, a lot of times by trying to decide what is the relationship we have with tech and what is the direction we want to go in by focusing on the tech side. Well, we think about, okay, we can make these infrastructures, we can make these different algorithmic changes, we can think about how different artificial intelligence is going to progress through its different levels until the ultimate AGI gets invented, if ever, right? But even if that never comes to fruition, right? Even if we never reach that AGI level where we're working hand in hand with an artificial intelligence that can, think with us or alongside us and sort of interact and act on behalf of us, not for us. I don't like to say for us, but acting on behalf of us based on maybe the preferences we've conveyed to it or we've allowed to it. Even if we never get there, these are still important questions because they still impact even the little bit of tech that we have. When we start maybe talking about like Internet of Things, what kind of relationship do you want with the tech in your home? All right? When you talk about privacy tech, what does that mean? And what does that mean for privacy as a concept socially in our relationship to that? So for me, one of the biggest things is to talk about those really fundamental human elements and maybe try and narrow those down a little bit more before we dive really deeply into some of the more technical questions.
Yeah, because it's really interesting what you said. It's also what your students said. Like we work together on a project. Yeah, your students are very, very clever.
And I had nothing to do with that. That was not me at all. I just am excited for them.
They were awesome, but they saw that technology is often being used as like an end goal. And like I said before, and not to speak on a certain country, but there's parts of organizations and people that just want to use technology because it's new, it's hype, and we need it. Mm-hmm. But in the end of the day, it's still a tool. Just as much as your air fryer is a tool or my Google Home is a tool to help me do certain things, get information quicker, prepare food. And I think we need to go back to that fundament of not even what is the problem that we have and how should we fix it, but what are our specific capabilities and what is technology's capability. We've made a clear segmented overview, which your student also worked on, is what is the difference between humans and what is the difference between technology? The thing is that we often try to replace one with the other. Like I said, with chatbots, customer service, we try and replace capable humans with emotions and empathy and feelings, and we replace them with a chatbot because it's cheaper, it's more efficient, it's cutting costs. But the thing is that a chatbot is not the same as a human being. It's a completely different skill. Because a chatbot, of course, it can run a script, it has faster replies, it can work 24/7. But on the other hand, humans are the ones that understand emotions. And there's so many examples. I've given personal examples as well of me, and it's out there in the blog post, that I was talking to my insurance agency. And I used to tell my best friend, he bought a house. I said, this is the insurance company that you need to take for all your insurances. They're awesome. Their service is high level. They have so many competent people who are willing to help, and they always do that extra step. I had to file an insurance claim once, and they phoned me the day after, like, did everything work out? Are you okay? Did you go home safely, etc. So I recommended them, and I think it was about a year and a half ago when I needed to contact them with a simple question. And instead of getting that emphatic person that I was used to, I got their chatbot. It didn't understand any of the questions that I had. It just gave like silly answers, and it actually told me to make my sentences shorter in order for it to understand me. Like, I'm not the robot here, you are the robot, right? You need to speak my language, not the other way around. So then I started talking to people working in that industry, to some C-level people, and they explained that sure, the technology should be a solution to a problem, but the problem never existed. The only problem was money, in the sense that it could be made cheaper. But now you see service levels declining because technology is used on spots where humans are actually like the better fit. And that's one of the problems that I see in just chasing the AI hype train. Let's put it everywhere. There's chatbots now. Let's install them and we'll see what happens. We're cutting costs, but they're also cutting on the service level. What is your take on that, on like that intersection of that working together?
Yeah, so that this will hopefully be a better answer to that previous question that you asked too, which is more along the lines, I think, here as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you have these sort of human as service ideas, right? Where somewhere along the line, we found the problem that, there's, communication between people is broken. And so therefore we need to do something with this, like chatbots. And that, like you said, was never the problem, right? People are communicating, providing customer service in that moment, right? People to people. I'm sure someone from HR or someone from maybe the industry would correct me here, but I never felt that there was a real systematic or fundamental problem between one person speaking with another person about the issues that they've had with their organization or their company and trying to resolve those. Like you said, money has been the issue, efficiency and time and all these ideas that follow along with what I would characterize as like a more technocratic shift. Right. So as we've moved forward into the new millennium, right? I'm a child of the 80s myself, so I've lived through that at least at a conscious level. You really see the shift from a richly textured human experience that had technology to sort of support it, to almost the opposite, where you have what feels to me like maybe a colder, less textured technological existence that's peppered with human experiences. And I have to be really honest, I don't like that. That's not my favorite way to go about this. But there are a lot of things in sort of this contemporary information society that we like about that: efficiency, convenience, saving costs, or making lots of money. Right? There are enormous profits to be had in this era. But I think we lose something very fundamental when we forget about the fact that, like you said, there wasn't a problem to begin with, right? We found a solution that's neat, but now what we have to kind of do is this almost hindsight and say, okay, we've had these solutions. They maybe created more problems on their own. Where can we really apply them? And again, this goes back to, I think, what I said earlier about looking at What do we as people want to be the relationship with tech? Because we've let tech drive that. I think for at least my last experience with that has been like the last 20 years. And to take a relatively stark look on it, that's something that inspired me to get into academia after being in sort of defense fields, right? Watching how the technology drove the way that we conducted war, the way that we did defense, right? And if there's one, I guess, field where I think it's really detrimental at a massive scale for us to lose the human element is in the way that defense happens, the way that maybe warfare is even conducted, if it has to continue to be. Okay, because then you find this very, very stale, very distanced engagement, and it really diminishes us as people across both parties, all parties involved, everything like that. And on a smaller scale, that's happening in these other sectors, right? And but I think it's a continuation of a larger societal trend that forces us back to that. And I think that's the important thing for me about looking at these intersection points between human and technology, is something that Gray and Surrey, the writers of Ghostwork, talk about, is this thing that they call the automation paradox, the paradox of automation. And what that is as we automate more things, maybe as we bring more things under the capabilities of artificial intelligence or just under algorithmic functioning, oversight, or management, we actually continue to just push the human labor aspect forward. We don't get rid of it. We never fully replace it, right? It's like on a simple level, if you want an algorithm that identifies pictures of dogs, you first have to train a bunch of data with people labeling things that say this is a dog. Then you train it to recognize a dog, and it's like, okay, great. Now you want it to identify Dalmatians, or you want it to identify Cocker Spaniels, or little teacup poodles, whatever your particular thing is, right? Well, now you need people to continue to do that. And that's just one example. And there are much more complex examples of how this happens. But people are always at the forefront. So humanity and the human factor always has a role to play. And it always will, I think. I don't think we'll ever replace it. I don't think that's a good goal to have anyway. But I'm not sure it's really one we can do. But it's one we can't just take for granted, one we can't ignore. So it's really important, like you said, to investigate these hotspots and to look at the different ways people are approaching this intersection of the innovative technology and the growth of it, its application, and the human factor.
Yeah, I think those roles need to be guarded. I think indeed, if you're a person identifying specific data to train an algorithm, that's perfectly fine. I mean, that's a great job, especially in this day and age. What I'm more concerned about is one of the examples that actually shook me. There was this elderly home that wanted to use technology to support people working there. Well, we know in the Netherlands that people working in people care, it's difficult. It's not really paying well. It's hard work, and we don't have enough people to staff the entire industry. The thing that they did is they announced that they were starting to use technology, and they started using robots in the elderly homes, taking care of people. And I thought, well, that's a good progress, because now we can support people working there so they can do more of the work that they actually came for. So they explain what they did, and I'm impressed. At the same time, I'm disappointed. They created a robot that was able to talk to people and recognize faces and then connect stories to those faces. So if someone told a story to that specific robot, the robot would come back the next day and it would recollect that memory. And say, well, yesterday you told me this, or tell me more about your son or your daughter, which is impressive on its own. But the thing is that the people who took on these jobs, these hardworking jobs, to help people and to take care of them, to talk to them, they were doing the dishes and they were doing the grocery runs, while a robot was doing the human work, which is talking to the elderlies living there, which is also the fun part of the job, I can imagine. And I think that's especially the wrong way around. I mean, it's impressive what we created in the sense of technology, but it's the wrong way around, I think.
Yeah, it continues this idea of tech driving even the when we identify an issue that we have with tech and the human relationship, we go, oh, okay, maybe there's a little bit of a misplaced priority here, or a misplaced desire with the way we've used this tech and the way we've positioned the human factor. Our first solution is still to add more tech. Oftentimes, is to say, "Oh, okay, well, we're having a problem like supporting these folks. We've given them all these tech tools to maybe make their tasks easier, but now that makes their interaction with the guests or the people living in these places that makes that more complicated or more time consuming." let's put technology on that. Let's have a robot that can do
Yeah.
that. And it's like, okay, well, like you said, I think it's really a great way to capture the idea that these roles need to be guarded, but we have to I think assign them some sort of value to be able to guard them, right? Like if we want to protect what humans do that's special in particular, and then we want to guard what technology does that's unique in particular, we first have to give it some kind of value, and then we have to weigh them against each other. And I think for too long we've had a little bit over evaluation of the tech side, and we've let this human side fall a little bit further. There's some work done by a woman, Virginia Eubanks. She wrote a book called Automating Inequality. And in it, she examines similar cases to what you found, although not necessarily those that have some sort of positive aspect to it. These ended up a little bit more negative. Things like creating these automated systems to provide, ratings or vulnerability evaluations for children in maybe broken homes or in societies. And that sounds great. Oh, we're going to make this more efficient. We're going to assess more children. We'll be able to get more things out. But what we find is that there are discontinuities there, right? Because the technology or the way that technology operates doesn't work within a vision or an understanding that maybe we have. And so too often, though, in this more technocratic shift that we've gone through, we default to it and we say, well, it's the system, it's right. Maybe I have a gut feeling that maybe this child is not as vulnerable as the system says it is, but that's the system. And if we make that writ large, and I'm not just trying to talk about the sort of tendency of humans to default to like computerized or automated decisions, but if we take this unvalued role or this, I guess, lack of comparison between the value we place on tech and the value we place on the human role, then it's very easy to let the more dominant, the faster moving one sort of drive us. Because in the end, people are complicated and society is complicated. And we've known this for millennia, right? Like some of these questions we're talking about, like, what does it mean to be human? That goes way back past the Greeks, past, ancient civilizations. So it's not like we're going to solve those messy human pieces right now. But what I think we're finding more and more out, and especially with your example, is that even our best technological efforts aren't right on the mark. So there's a lot of attention that needs to be paid to that. And I think there's a lot of room for really gainful human employment in that, right? Like the best, I guess, entity to consider this interaction between humans and technology and where they best complement each other is actually a human being. And employing more people in that and maybe thinking, okay, maybe a human answer is maybe the first answer we go with before we look at the tech solution, right? But again, all of this writes back to ultimately, what is our relationship with tech? What do we want it to be? Because is tech the driver or is tech a tool? How does that work? And then we can really begin to fit those puzzle pieces of the integration a little bit more smoothly, I think.
Maybe it shouldn't be the question of what does it mean to be human, but what do we want to be as humans? Like which things do we want to do?
Yeah, that's a really great way to capture it, because I think that highlights the agency. We're in control, right? Like when it comes to what it means to be human, that's for us to decide. That's not for us to be dictated to, which again, maybe is what happens sometimes with technology when it tells us like, oh, a robot can communicate with an elderly person just as well and just as, authentically as a person can. And sometimes maybe we don't think so. But again, that's not to knock on that technology in any way, but it's just to say that's a question to ask. It's like, what is the role of that robot or that technology, and what is the role of the human there, and which is the best solution? Because that's what they both are. They're both solutions to maybe an issue or a problem or a way forward.
Exactly. Yeah. It's we should position ourselves in where we want to be, and then find technology to support us in that specific role. We did some research back in 2020. We called it State of Human, where we were interested in seeing how people within organizations were looking at technology and how it was interacting with their jobs, or maybe even that they were afraid that it would take over their jobs. And one specific quote said, just bring me any problem and I will create technology to solve it. Which made us go, well, we probably can, but should we? I think that would be a question. That would be a good question whenever we face a problem. Can we create technology to solve this problem, and should we? Or do we have the capabilities to just solve this problem and go through on with our lives?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, it's a very curious like technocratic blend, right? It's all these like increased bureaucratic relationships, and then the increased technology behind it. So it's like more tech to be serviced by more tech, more tech. Yeah.
It just depends on who you ask as well. If you're working full on technology and you're developing stuff, of course you want to keep developing things and find problems and solve them, which makes perfect sense. I think that for me personally, I'm in the best position because I'm in between. Because I love technology, but I also love like the psychology and human and social part. So it allows me to find like that synergy between the both of them. But I can imagine if you're purely focusing on humans, then you might resent technology, like, oh, we shouldn't use too much of it and just like you leave it there. And for the technology side, I understand that you're saying, well, just I just want to make cool stuff, and it's logical. It's human behavior as well.
Yeah, it's like you said, from the technology side, you see things you're like, but this can be so much more efficient. This can be so much more effective, or this can be so much more productive at scale, right? So you have kind of a different language than the person who's like, but it's less warm, it's less authentic, or it's less human. And something that's encouraging though for me anyway is to see organizations like yours that exist and the service that you provide, and also to see changes that we see in like education pipelines for technologists, right? Or people working in advanced technology, to see that they're kind of, they have been for a few years now, realizing that, some of these more social considerations, these more ethical considerations, these broader human implications or considerations are important for us to also think about, right? Because if you're designing the tech, but you're not being made aware of potential social implications, then it's not necessarily on you because you're dedicated to finding this technical solution. So it really is, I think, a fantastically broad global human opportunity to work together that's presented to us by this kind of technology, and like you said, your position is one that I would hope is not to wish you competitors in the future or anything like that, but say that your position is one that people value and think is important and invest in going forward, so that we have more people doing this kind of work as this AI enterprise, or as this technology growth continues.
Yeah, because it's just about the blind spots. We never blame anyone. If you have a tech organization, of course you're focusing on tech, and maybe you don't have the expertise to see the social impact. So I think it's purely based on awareness. If you're aware of the impact that your technology can have, or the opportunities that your human work has in order to adapt technology, it's just about the awareness. But how do you feel? Because I think that's also your area. Like, how do you feel education should play a role in like working towards this like tech human world, so to say? I mean, Web 3.0 is coming. We're focusing even more on technology, but also building community. What should be the perfect role for education in this?
Oof, so that's a tough one. Yeah, like what is what is the perfect role? There's so much debate about that, and I'm new to education in that sense at this level playing that, but I think I have some at least some personal perspective on it that I feel really strongly about, which is I think you can't, with education has to be in the position of the middleman. It has to be in that middle sector saying, look, technology is something we are going to use and we're going to need, and being human and thinking critically about social things are things we also need. So when you bring those to a student, now you have to think about, okay, within the parameters of this course, how can I do two things? How can I maybe introduce technology that will help the student solve problems or help them with their learning process? But how can I also emphasize that the technology itself maybe isn't the learning or isn't the focus of the learning process, and that there are human skills that we are trying to use to build? So my personal approach to blending the human and the tech in education is I try to position the tech as tools and to give it continual value, while letting them know that education is really about giving you the human skills that will help you succeed with or without technology going forward. Right? Because if you have a certain base set of human skills, critical thinking, the ability to present yourself, to communicate with other people, to dedicate yourself and commit yourself to solving different problems and puzzles, then it doesn't matter what technology you're given. right? So that, and I think that's a great position for a person to be in, is to be like, okay, as technology evolves, I am still relevant because I have this fantastic capacity and this fantastic suite of skills that allow me to adapt and let me go, okay, new technology, bring that into my palette and apply it to different problems. Something else new, here we go. Or I need something new, right? Like I recognize a problem that current technology doesn't solve or doesn't help me address. So let me then innovate something that can do that, right? At the moment, and this again, maybe my narrow view, but technology doesn't innovate technology. The people behind technology continue to innovate, and they make these changes, and they've got skills that bring the technology into existence, right? And that's something that I think education has a really important role, is continuing to put value on that, continuing to put value on the fact that the human being is important, but also not just, I guess, not dismissing technology and recognizing it, that it's a fantastic way to really improve ourselves as people, maybe, or as workers, or as society, whichever level you really want to look at it at.
Yeah, that's really well said. I mean, if you're the strongest human being you can be, it doesn't even matter what technology comes about, because you're able to use it in a way that it benefits you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also what the UAE focuses on with the planning that they have, right, for 2030, is that they are now upscaling humans to be like to use their most of their own potential.
I like the way you said that, upscaling humans. Yeah, that's the terminology is fantastic.
Yeah, they are relearning what it means to be human. It does sound kind of futuristic, but it works because first of all, it was the narrative of it's okay to be human because we are emotional, we are creative. I mean, like 20 years ago, being creative was a hobby, right? But it's a human skill which is very valuable to every organization. It doesn't even matter. Creative doesn't mean I can make a painting or a drawing. Being creative is critical thinking. It's creative thinking. It's helping people. It's communicating, and they kind of recognize that if they teach people how to be people, then it doesn't matter what technological innovations come about, because they can use it to match and empathize their skills, rather than we need technology to do everything for me because I'm a human being and I don't have any skills anymore. I think that's the best way to go about it. And I think that education, that's what I liked so much about the program that you ran with the students that we worked with, is that they were able to combine their social background with seeing technology as a tool, and then finding a problem first, because obviously you ask what is the problem that you want our students to work on. They understood the problem, and they use their like personal backgrounds and their personal interpretations of things, and then try to figure out, okay, so what technology do we have and how can we implement it into our problem, which we already understand as a human being, which is, in my opinion, the best way to go about.
Yeah. That's something that was a big challenge for us, and a kind of a big unknown with that program when the Ward van Zonen and Francesca, and it's terrible that I'm forgetting her last name right now, but I work with her a bunch. When they put the course together, and they really came up with this idea, because I tacked on later, they thought about bringing corporations in and having you provide these challenges. When they pulled me onto the team and said, this is what you're going to be sort of running and overseeing with the students, I said, okay. What does that look like? Like what kind of I had no idea what to expect from what students would find, what they would get, how you would interact with them. So this whole experience has been really exciting and anxiety causing, for sometimes thinking, oh my gosh, did we give them enough tools? Have I talked to them? But like specifically the teams that worked with you and a number of the other organizations as well too, they had great engagement with you, and so they had a great time looking at that. And it was so important from my perspective that they be able to work with people who knew about the tech, knew about the sort of the hard points about the challenge, but let them bring some of their softer social sciences as students to it, right? And again, not dismissing either or, but really focusing on where do those two come together and can we have some kind of solution. So yeah, it was really exciting to see the end product of all that.
Yeah, I enjoyed all the presentations. I was impressed how they did it in only 10 weeks, because they're still fairly young, in an area which is new. This was the first time that they did this kind of program. So was it for your organization as well? But how they managed to like grasp hold of such an enormous problem that we needed like the first year of our existence just to figure out like how can we look at this problem and how can we try and fix it. And I think they just felt the freedom to use their own interpretation. And I saw that with the other organizations as well, that they just gave them the freedom. Like, okay, you're the ones learning. You are the ones that have the social background. This is our technological, we have these innovations. We have the information for you. Go and figure it out. And they did. They asked great questions. They really try to penetrate the problem and to grasp hold of it. And for my experience, for both teams that we had in the first week, they kind of felt which way they wanted to go, which was very impressive. But I think that's the combination of their background, the interpretation that they had, and the freedom that everyone gave them to just solve this problem. Like, you're the student, you're going to be the employee later on, or you're going to be the business owner. Yeah. Go and figure it out. I think that was the best way to go about it.
Yeah, and it speaks back to that idea that I said about having this suite of human skills, right? Like having this package of softer, less technical skills that you can bring in, and marrying that with an organization that gives you the freedom to exercise those, and when we think writ large about how organizations or just certain societies approach challenges, right? Sometimes we're very quick to set technological constraints on how these things can be accomplished, how they can be done. And what I think this course, on a very small scale, and I don't want to oversell anything, demonstrates is that, yeah, in certain realms, an openness to letting that suite of human skills emerge, and then bringing in that palette of technological tools and saying, okay, you've had these ideas, you've approached these problems. Let's see what is there. And if there's nothing there, right now we've got room for innovation too. And I think that's actually something that I wish we did more with students, because all the students, when they first came into this program, and this is actually something I'm kind of just thinking of at the moment here, is like when they came into the program, they thought, okay, I have to find something new. Right? Like how can I find something new to answer this solution? Like, here's this broad challenge that Ryan is not giving me any information about and not helping me with at all, and you expect me to come up with something innovative and new with it. And the answer that we sat down and talked about with them was like, no, that's not what we're looking for. If innovation comes about, it will come about. But I don't expect you to, a blank canvas from scratch, come up with something. I want you to work with your organization, look at the materials they have, think about the things that are already provided, that already exist, and let either innovation come to you or find a different solution that emerges, right? So encouraging people that this driving need, and maybe it's a very American thing sometimes too, but that whole hustle about I got to be new, I got to be innovative, realizing that sometimes the best way to get there is to let the existing state of things show you what it needs, right? But if you're so caught up in being new and innovative and tech and blah 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 and all this sort of spinning stuff, you miss that sometimes. And again, back to that human suite of skills, that's where that emerges from. That ability to look at the problems in these different ways, to engage with the organizations, look at the challenges, let innovation emerge or find solutions in different ways, is something that, again, this course on a small scale demonstrates could be applicable much larger.
Yeah, for sure. Because what I saw is that they were kind of surprised when we talked to them about innovation and said, you can also innovate the human side, right? You can innovate on humans. They were like, but innovation is technology. No. It's not the same thing.
Exactly.
But it makes sense, but because they all look at the same things, they all look at social media, and everything that we see is innovating on technology. You see NFTs, you see Web3, you see Bitcoin, whatever. So I understand that perspective. But once they saw that you can innovate on the human side, they were like, okay, that means that we can like boost human capabilities. Like, yeah, that's exactly what we can do. That's exactly what we should do as well.
Right.
And I think that opened up a couple of doors for them, because now they weren't focused on we need to find some new, like the new AI, whatever. No, just figure out something. This is the problem, and every solution counts. If it's on the human side, technology side, whatever it is, this is a problem. Find a solution. Doesn't matter what you use. And I think they both both the teams that we had focused on the human side, specifically on the research side. They didn't think of any form of technology. What they actually did is figure out a way to be more, have a more humane approach towards technology. It doesn't even matter in which organization, industry, whatever. So they had a very broad knowledge, because the first complaint that they have is it's such a broad question and it's such a blurry thing. But they came out with something that is even broader, but that can be used on everything. It's very impressive.
Yeah, no, it's shoot, I had something. What was I going to say? Oh, must have been a lie, I guess. That's what I was saying. I forget. Oh no. So yeah, so we talk to them in this course. They get a bunch of lectures about different theories and different ways to approach AI. But something that sort of shocked the humans, something that shocked the students a little bit, was how much human stuff we talk about, right? Like how much people side we talk about, more so than the intricate technological infrastructures or things with these different theories. And just like you said, they were really hesitant when they spoke with me about being able to, can we focus on the people? Can we look exclusively at the human side of this? And it's like, well, yeah. I mean, one, if that's what you think the solution lies, or where you think an answer lies, then of course go for it. But that's also totally fine within the theories that we're looking at, right? Because again, we're not preaching to you, or we're not trying to just bring you to a sort of technological proficiency. We're trying to bring you something a little bit broader, right? We're trying to bring you I say it again, that suite of human skills that really help you adapt and navigate the technological landscape, because that's what humans can really contribute to each other, right? Is we can help build those skills that help us collectively navigate this landscape that we're building on different challenges, technology, and the different and forever existing cultural things and social things that will impact that landscape and shape it in different ways.
I recognize everything you said. It's exactly what they told us. Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, I could go on for hours about this. I want to kind of close down the great conversation that we've had so far, but not without asking you for, do you have a final thought for me, for us, for everyone listening?
Well, first, yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to talk about this, because it's been really educational for me. I'm super excited to research and look into some of these projects that you've talked about. I think the final thing for me is just to really emphasize the broken record point that I've been going on about for most of the conversation, is really that we are in charge, right? And I think socially we lose sight of that. We lose ourselves in our phones or in our tech, and any sort of manifestation of this, like I said, technocratic shift that's carrying us forward into the future. But what I'm seeing more and being more encouraged by, as like I talk to these different platform workers, as we look at what regulatory bodies are doing, and we look at just what tech companies are starting to do too, because for all their flaws and maybe instances, there are really human efforts being made within the tech community and all the different sectors around. So the thing that I would leave us with is to not be discouraged by maybe any of the failings or the obstacles that pop up, and continuing to invest in this human side, continuing to try and answer some of these older human questions, because they're not irrelevant. They're actually only becoming more relevant, because the more advanced our technology becomes, the more it challenges what we are as people and what it means, like you said before, to be a human being in this time and to relate to this technology. So for those, students out there looking to invest in liberal arts studies, do it. If you want to study history, do it. If you want to study the classics, do it. But don't be afraid to think that that's still relevant to the technological landscape that you might find yourself in. And, I tell some of these students, because they say, I'm really interested in artificial intelligence. I'm really interested in the growing tech, but I'm not a technical person. And I'm like, so? What they need people who are humans, right? They need people who aren't just lost in the tech. When we need both those, and I don't in any way. My dad's an engineer. My best friend is an engineer. So I don't in any way disparage that more technical capacity. We need that, but we also need the pairing of the both. Right. So the investment for us writ large, both in education, in the market, in society writ large, for me anyway, is this idea that intersection is where we're going to get the most value from. So invest in people, invest in technology, and in the ways that they can be both valued and protected. I really like your guarded idea. I'm going to take that and use it. I'm going to credit you everywhere for it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I couldn't have said it any better. And you can see I'm smiling ear to ear because I completely agree with what you said. Ryan, thank you so much for this great conversation, for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for the time, Ferry. It's been really great.
It was my pleasure. And to you listening, thank you, stay tuned and stay human.